So again, our training is brought to you today by our partners over at Ventura County. Today, we are so happy to be joined by Rebecca Tafoya, one of the business solutions specialists there, who's here to share more about the resources available to employers like you. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you so much, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Rebecca. I'm a business solutions specialist with the Workforce Development Board. As part of the Workforce Development Board, we have many services that we provide to employers, but one of them is our complimentary HR, which is a Human Resources Hotline, which is a no-cost hotline where you can definitely call and have any HR questions answered at no cost. So some of the questions that do come up are hiring and firing processes, paid sick leave laws, breaks and lunches and overtime, and employee handbooks, harassment prevention, and remote workers. So I just wanted to, remind everybody that this is here for you, and it's Monday through Friday. You can call anytime between 9 and 5. Thank you so much and welcome to the webinar. I know they have some great information today on pay scale and pay data. So thank you so much, and I'll let you take it from here, Anna.
Awesome. Thank you again, Rebecca.
Thank
Um,
you.
Sorry, I thought I saw something in the chat. Excuse me there. So now I'd love to introduce our trainer today. We have Eli Nunez, one of our human resource directors, who you may have had the pleasure of working with if you've called into that HR hotline. So I'm going to hand it over to Eli.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, Rebecca, as well. And thank you to the Workforce Development Board of Ventura County for partnering with us and helping to sponsor and present this webinar to you. Again, just a reminder, if you have any questions about anything HR related, whether it's any of the topics we have on here or something that we discuss on this webinar, maybe if you think of something later and you start think, I should have asked a question, give us a call on the hotline. We'd love to help you with that. So a little bit more about us. I keep saying we. As Ann mentioned, we are California Employers Association, and our goal is to provide peace of mind to employers throughout the Golden State of California. That includes both members and those of you that call us from the hotline. So we provide webinars and trainings such as the one you're attending today. We also have that hotline that you can call. Basically, we have phone support. Um, with HR experts. So if you have any questions about human resources, we're there to help. Sometimes if you just have a situation that you just want to talk through, right? Because sometimes, when you talk through an HR situation or complicated topic, just talking through it with somebody helps you to solve it. We're there for you. Let us bend our ear with it. Let us be your soundboard so we can come up with a good solution and keep you running smoothly, right? HR is very complicated, so if there's anything we can help with, we're here for you. We help a variety of different businesses throughout different industries, and here's just a small list of some of our members. Some whether it's hotline or they're subscribed members with us. As you can see, we're all over the place, different sizes, different industries, different types of business. So at the end of the day, people are people. Human resources is human resources. So a lot of the same ideas, a lot of the same concepts transfer over. So trust me, give us a call. You can't really surprise us. It shouldn't be something we haven't heard before. And if it is, we'll figure it out together. I think it's also important to say that one thing to keep in mind is that we are not lawyers. We're not a legal firm. We do not give legal advice. And this presentation itself, even though we will discuss some things related to California law, is more of a educational presentation, right? We're going to talk about what the requirements are. We're going to talk about, what we have to do to comply with the laws and the different acts and requirements, but we're not going to give legal advice. We do recommend if you have any questions of a legal nature to consult legal counsel so they can best guide you in that arena or in that direction. So having said all that, let's go ahead and get started with our topic today. Some of the things we'll touch upon will be the California Equal Pay Act, what it means, how it affects us, and what we must do to be compliant with it. What restrictions this places on us as employers inquiring about people's salary history and how we can and cannot use that information. When we have to disclose our pay scales and how that varies based on the size of our organization. And finally, if you're here because you don't have any pay scales or you're looking to make them from scratch or to rework your pay scales, we're going to go over I'll call them 6 easy steps to create pay scales that are compliant with California's requirements. So we'll jump right into it. The first one is, what really guides us as far as pay? What law or what kind of acts provide the parameters on how we pay our employees? And really, that just comes down to the California Equal Pay Act. This is not anything new. It's been around for several decades. And initially, it started off by basically prohibiting employers from paying its employees differently based on gender or based on the opposite sex, right? So we've all heard the stats about women in America earning anywhere from 70 to 90 cents to the dollar that males earn through in this country. And that's, what the origins of this act were, to bring some equality, right? To basically start paying people based on the work, not on their gender. That expanded a little bit later on to include, race and ethnicity. More specifically, in 2015, Governor Jerry Brown signed what was called the California Fair Pay Act, which basically expanded on the original Equal Pay Act. And again, I mean, like other laws, this is one that ever since it originated, it was expanded to include more protections for different groups that maybe historically had been disadvantaged or were at a basically not given the same opportunities or the same pay as other groups. So again, it's basically the whole purpose of the act is to make sure people are paid equally across the board for their work, regardless of sex, race, ethnicity, other factors like that. So the question that comes up with that is, what does it actually require? What are the requirements of the act? And we talked a little bit about in the last slide what it means, but really the big requirements basically state that we cannot pay an employee less than an employee of another sex, race, or ethnicity for what's called substantially similar work. In other words, we can't differentiate amongst our employees based on specifically on sex, race, or ethnicity. We can't say, well, we're going to pay our women, 50 cents less per hour, 50 cents more per hour than our men just because they're women or just because they're of a certain race or certain ethnicity or what have you, right? So again, this basically means, we are looking at the work itself, not at the employee specific group that they belong to. Now, something important to think about this definition is, what does substantially similar work mean? Does that mean the same job, the same job title, the same job duties, or whatever? And the way it's kind of defined is, substantially similar work is work that's similar in skill. What skill does the employee need in order to perform the work? And that could include things like their training, their education, their experience, all those things that build those skills to perform the tasks required. What kind of an effort's required, right? Whether it's physical or mental exertion. What kind of effort are they bringing into the job? Does it involve, carrying or moving heavy objects, or making complicated calculations or complicated decisions based on experience or based on things they have learned? What kind of responsibility does the person have? Whether it's responsibility for certain tasks or certain processes, or whether it's responsibility as far as people reporting to them. And what are the conditions that they're working under? Is it a hazardous condition? Is it a very physically taxing conditions there? Is there extreme heat, extreme cold? Are they standing at all times? Are they sitting? Are they staring at a screen? That sort of thing. We're looking at all those things to see how similar the positions are. Again, because, it's not just about what the job title is, it is, what does the work actually entail? We could name a job whatever we wanted, but at the end of the day, we're looking at the different parts of it to see what the job actually is. So let's look at an example to see what this would look like potentially in a workplace. So in this case, we have Brianna, who's an African American female. She's an HR manager at your company, and she earns $70,000 per year. Tom is a Caucasian male who's also an HR manager at your company, but he earns $90,000 per year. Now, just looking at this, given this very minor snippet of information we got, this little snapshot, we could say that, hey, you know what? This could be something to look into, because you could have a pay equity issue based on sex and or race, unless there's legitimate justification for the pay disparity. In other words, if we just look at this picture and say, hey, you have Brianna, who's an African American female, that's an HR manager. We have Tom, who's a Caucasian male, that's also an HR manager, and there's a $20,000 pay difference there. You know, what's going on? Well, the thing about it is, there could be some justification or some reason for that pay difference, right? it's not always, as clear cut as it first appears. So in this case, you could have legitimate reasons why there is a pay difference, and those are perfectly valid to the state of California. Some of these reasons can include seniority, maybe he's been at your company for 10 years already and she is brand new, right? And he's, basically climbed up the pay scale and she is still at the very beginning. That is a perfectly valid reason for there to be a pay difference and something the state would recognize. Could be merit. Maybe he has excelled at during his performance reviews or excelled at his jobs, where she has remained, pretty consistent, but hasn't really, risen above as much as he had. So throughout the years, he's gotten more of a pay increase than she has, and therefore has, you know, has that pay differential. If it's production based, and we see that in other jobs, right? Maybe if it's a production based compensation system, whereas production is so much higher that it merits a higher amount of pay, and we can quantify that and document that, that would also be acceptable to the state of California. Or if there is some other bona fide factor, something that is recognized by the state of California. In other words, if he has more extensive education, training, or experience, right? Maybe he was hired and he had a master's degree, whereas she's got a bachelor's, or something along those lines that applies to the job, and that would be a factor in the pay differential. That would also be acceptable. Again, and we're looking at things like education, training, experience. Those are things that we can look at when we are maybe looking to pay somebody a little more than somebody else upon hiring. Now, one thing we should not and absolutely cannot consider is prior salary history, right? So we can't say, well, we asked when we hired him, we asked Tom what he was making the previous job, and he said 90, and we asked, her what she was making, she's at 70, so that's what we brought him on as. That is not acceptable because, in the state's view, again, there has been pay inequity in the past, and there probably still is, honestly speaking, right? And the whole purpose of this act is to, bring people into equal ground based on their job, based on their performance, based on their skills, not based on what they were paid in the past. Because maybe some people, started at a lower scale based on discriminatory factors. So we want to make sure we erase that and make sure we're paying people equally. So that's why we're not allowed to look at prior salary history. That should not be a factor in determining what we're paying somebody. And as you'll see, there's also some restrictions placed upon what we can do with salary history. And the first one of these specifically when we're hiring somebody. Now, if you've been through our webinars in the past couple of years, you've probably heard us say that, we should not be asking candidates or applicants their salary history and using that as a factor in hiring. So for those of you that have navigated the job market as long as I have, on and off for a couple decades, several decades actually, you'll remember past job applications. They said, where did you work? How much did you pay were you paid at the start? How much were you paid at the end? That question is no longer valid. So if you have job applications that you hand out at work for any candidates, go back and take a look at them to make sure that there is no salary history questions on there. And that not only includes, how much you're paid per hour, that also includes any benefits or that sort of thing if you're asking for it, because benefits are a part of total compensation. So we should not be asking that on the application. We should not be asking that at job interviews. And if you're not the one that does the interviews at your organization, if you have managers or assistant managers that help with the interview process, make sure that they are also trained to know that they should not be inquiring about salary history during the application or interview process. Okay. And again, reason for that is, hey, there was a pay gap in the past based on some of these illegitimate reasons, right? Based on, gender, based on race, based on ethnicity. Historically, people in certain groups were paid less just because they belonged in those groups. So by taking that salary history into account, we're basically continuing those original inequities. And the whole purpose of this is to eliminate them, to look at people based on their skills, based on what they bring to the table, based on the job they're doing, not based on what they were paid in the past. So again, a little bit more about, the definition. So for applicants, people that are applying to our jobs, we cannot ask them what their past salary was or what their past compensation was. Now, current employees, different story. Why is that? Because we have their employment files. If we want to know what they've been paid with our organization, all we have to do is go into HR and either ask them or go pull their employee file and see what their pay history is with our organization. Current employees, it's perfectly fine to see what their pay history is with our organization, but applicants, we cannot ask them for their pay history in previous organizations or in other organizations, if that's clear, right? Now, we can ask candidates what their salary expectations are if they have a range of how much they'd like to make, right? And that's important because once they tell us what their range is, we can determine if that falls within the range that we're willing to pay for that position or if there's some negotiation or further conversation. So again, it's perfectly fine to ask for people's salary expectations, how much they'd like to make or what range they'd like to be in, but we cannot ask specifically how much they were paid in past positions. So a question also comes up, well, what if it comes up in conversation? What if we don't ask and the applicant tells us, you know, what they made? If they come and say, oh, well, before this, I was working at, CEA and I was being paid $75,000 a year. It's like, whoa, 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 I didn't ask. But what do we do with that? Can we use that information? I mean, it's already out there, right? If it was volunteered without prompting, it's presented. We can't ignore it. At the same time, we can't rely on that to make our decision. So basically, you kind of treat it as if they tell you exactly what they're making, you kind of treat it as them giving you that range of where they expect to be in, right? It's not going to make our final decision, but it gives us a conversation point. It gives us a point of reference to know which way we're going, whether it's with the job offer, salary negotiations, that sort of thing. So again, we can't rely on that for pay disparity. So say for instance, if I go to apply for a job and currently I'm making $70,000 a year and their pay range for the job is from, 80,000 to 100,000, I go and I say, well, I was making 70,000 my last job. They can't say, oh, well, we're going to pay 80 to 100, but if he was only making 70, let's just pay him 70. Because again, that is just carrying on that potential pay inequity that was present in the past and perpetuating it going forward. So if you have a pay scale for a position, you're going to pay people based on that pay scale, not on their salary history, not on whatever they volunteered, not on their pay range. You should have your pay scale set up and have some metrics in there to decide where people are going to land. So how about sharing that pay information, the pay data? What do we have to disclose? What do we have to tell our candidates or our employees or even the government? Well, that's going to vary a little bit based on the size of our organization. So one requirement that applies for all employers, regardless of the size of the organization, is that we have to provide the pay scale to any job applicant or current employee that requests it. In other words, if we have an applicant that comes in and applies for a job as a receptionist, they say, I want to apply, but what's the position pay? We have to give them a range. We have to give them the pay scale for it. Say, well, the position starts at 16.50 an hour, and it goes all the way up to 25 based on experience, based on whatever it is, whatever your metrics are. So you have to give them a range, a pay scale of what the position is. All employers also have to retain data or information on each employee's job title and wage rate history. And hopefully, whenever you're changing somebody's job title or they're transferring or you're changing their pay, you're documenting it in some way and placing it in their file. That's enough to comply with this requirement. Now, if you're just doing a handshake deal or scribbling on a cocktail napkin or something, or just walking around indiscriminately giving people promotions and raises and not documenting it, one, you're really gonna piss off your payroll person because they're the last ones to find out. And two, you're not complying with this because you don't have a record, a written record of the change, when it took effect, what it was, the reason for it, that sort of thing. It's important to document those things. And again, as with all other aspects of human resources, documentation is your friend. So we want to make sure we document any changes in job title, wage rate, whatever it is, and file it away with the employee's information. Now, if you have 15 or more employees, this requirement increases to the point where you have to include the position's pay scale in any job posting. So if we're posting for a receptionist in, whatever website, Indeed, Monster, whatever it is, and you have 15 or more employees, you have to include what the pay scale is for that position. That's very simple. Again, hiring a receptionist, looking for somebody to work in a dynamic work environment, lots of teamwork. This position pays from $16.50 to $25 an hour based on experience. Something very simple like that. As long as it's your true pay scale, what you're willing to pay for that position, what that position has the potential of earning, what it's starting at, you are compliant with that. So again, if you have 15 or more employees and you post jobs out there, make sure that you're including the pay scale with that job posting. Now, I've said pay scale probably a couple dozen times in the past couple slides. So what does pay scale mean? How is it defined and what earnings does it include? Well, basically, a pay scale is the salary or the hourly wage range that the employer reasonably expects to pay for the position, right? Now, we're not talking about just starting salary. We're not saying, well, this position starts from, minimum wage to $20. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the whole position. So you have a receptionist position, what is the least, what's the starting salary for it, and what is the most that you expect to pay a receptionist with your organization? What's the cap for that position? That's what the range includes. What the minimum starting pay is and what the cap for the position is, right? We don't have to include things like bonuses, tips, or any other benefits beyond the pay rate. So, and again, if you give, monthly bonuses or if you give yearly bonuses or whatever, you don't have to include that in the pay scale. But you should have at least, what the lowest and the highest paid person in that position is at your company. So if you don't have a set pay scale right now, if you haven't made one, you can, I guess, cheat or create one just based on, hey, we have 3 receptionists right now. The one that makes the most makes $30 an hour. The one that makes the least, is at minimum wage. So we'll make that our pay scale for now, right? And the $30 one is topped off. They're not going anywhere. And whoever it starts is going to start at 16.50. Well, that's your pay scale, 16.50 to $30. But again, you can expand beyond that based on needs because cost of living increases, the company grows, responsibility grows, that sort of thing. So you can always keep expanding on it. Just make sure you keep updating that information. So who do we have to disclose this information to? And again, this applies to all employers. Well, if you have current employees and they want to know what the pay scale for their current position is and they ask you for it, whether it's in writing or verbally, we have to provide them what that pay scale is. All right. Now that is just for their position. If I walk into the office and say, hey, I'm a machine operator too, and I was seeing my buddy Pete over there is just sitting around. He's a machine operator for. I want to know how much he's making. We don't have to tell him that. All you have to give somebody is the pay scale for their current position. So if I wanted to ask, what's my position top off at, where to start, and I ask for that either verbally or in writing, the organization would have to provide that to me in a reasonable amount of time. What's a reasonable amount of time? Well, the state doesn't give us a number. It doesn't tell us, a reasonable amount of time is 24 hours or 15 hours or 12 hours or whatever. It just tells us a reasonable amount of time. So we just have to show we're making the effort to provide that in a reasonable amount of time. 1 business day is probably reasonable. 2 business days is probably reasonable. Hopefully, pay scales are something you have on hand and you can produce them pretty quickly, right? Something to keep in mind too, when we're talking about current employees, is that the National Labor Relations Act does allow employees to discuss wages, hours, and working conditions with each other. So a lot of times we have members that ask us, hey, we really don't want our employees talking about how much they make or how much other people make. Can we make that against the rules? Can we write somebody up for discussing that? And the answer is no, absolutely not. If you were to write somebody up or discipline somebody for talking about their compensation or asking others for what their compensation is or having those discussions in public, you would violate the National Labor Relations Act, Section 7, I believe it is, and you could get in trouble. So again, employees have the right to discuss that amongst themselves. They have the right to discuss, working hours, working conditions, etc., with each other. So be aware of that. Now that's for employees. When it comes to applicants, again, if they request the pay scale, either in writing or orally, we have to provide that to them in a reasonable amount of time. And again, as a reminder, if you have 15 more employees, that should be posted on the job posting. Now, as I mentioned, these protections keep expanding, and most recently, in 2024, we had Senate Bill 497, which is what's called a retaliation presumption. And basically what this does is it says that if an employer takes adverse action against an employee within 90 days of them taking any action under the labor code, in other words, if an employee files a wage claim or complaint about equal pay, and within 90 days of them filing that complaint, there is some kind of adverse action taken against them, whether it's a write-up, a termination, a suspension, whatever it is, then the state is going to assume that it was done for retaliatory reasons. So pretty rough, right? I mean, this basically places all the burden of proof on the employer to show that their actions taken were not retaliatory. So how do we do that as employers? Well, same way we hopefully do everything else. We document everything. For instance, if you have an employee that files a wage claim or an unequal pay claim with the state, and this is an employee that has had an attendance issue in the past, hopefully you've been documenting those attendance issues, right? You've had write-ups, you've had warning, etc. And if they, if they break that rule again during those 90 days, you have all this documentation backing up that, hey, you know what? They're at the next step. They were on the final warning for attendance. They were absent again with an unexcused absence. We took action. It had nothing to do with that protected action that they took, right? Again, this is very dependent on you documenting everything and you consistently applying the rules across the board. So, if you have other people that have been tardy all the time and you haven't written them up, but this person, you just happen to write them up and you happen to terminate them or whatever it is, he could turn around and point and say, you know what, these other 5 people have been absent as much as I have, and they were not terminated. So therefore, I can conclude that it's basically a way in disguise for them to get rid of me because I filed that claim. So be very careful with it. Again, if you have any kind of wage claim against you, hopefully you've consulted legal counsel, and if the situation arises, make sure that you're consulting with them before taking um, any kind of adverse action, just to make sure it doesn't backfire on you. Okay. Now there are also record retention requirements, as I mentioned. Any kind of pay change or job title change should hopefully be recorded, documented, and filed. And you have to maintain those records for up to 3 years after an employee separates from employment. And it's starting from January 2023 going forward, right? So if you just started documenting those changes effective, January 2023, make sure that you keep all that documentation for up to 3 years after the employee separates, right? And this is just basically the employee's pay history, pay and position history that's documented in their file. So make sure you keep that in their file and you retain that file for at least 3 years after they leave your organization, just in case you get audited or something comes up, you do have that information that you can show that you are compliant with it. All right. So let's talk more about, those of you with large organizations with 15 or more employees. And what it means for job postings. Now, what we mean with 15 or more employees is 15 or more employees located anywhere in the world. So, for instance, if you're a company that's based in out of state, let's say North Carolina, and you're hiring one employee in California for a sales position, so he's going to be your only California employee, but you have 15 or more employees throughout the country. For that job posting in California, you have to include the pay range. You have to comply with it because you have 15 or more employees anywhere in the country and the position is in California. Now, those posting requirements are only for California positions. So if you're hiring a sales rep for California and a sales rep for Arizona, I don't know what Arizona's laws are on pay scales and pay disclosures. So you would have to comply with the Arizona posting for whatever Arizona law is, I'm sorry. But for California's posting, you have to comply with California's requirements. And again, we're counting everybody on our payroll to see if we have 15 or more employees, whether they're full-time, part-time, regular, temp employees, exempt, non-exempt, whatever it is. It's a total of 15 employees anywhere in the world. Okay? So again, if you have 15 or more, you have to make sure you have the pay scale in any of those California job postings. It's got to be listed on the posting itself. You can't say, for the pay scale information, follow this link. Nope. It's got to be right on the job posting itself. Okay. And again, this is for any position that could be filled in California. So If you're hiring somebody for Colorado, but you're going to post the job in California, you have to follow California's job posting requirements. All right. So how much time do you have to respond to pay scale requests? And we talked about this a little bit earlier. Again, there's no clear answer, right? A reasonable amount of time. So all the state's asking us for now is for you to show a good faith effort to respond in a reasonable amount of time. So if an employee comes and asks you, hey, I want to know what the pay scale is for my position, and you're walking out of your office because you're going to a meeting or something, you can say, you know what? I will give it to you tomorrow morning. To me, that sounds like a reasonable amount of time. You know, if you're in the middle of an audit and you can't drop everything to go find the pay scale, you say, you know what? I'll give it to you by end of business or whatever it is, right? Just a reasonable amount of time. So hopefully, something could facilitate this is if you already have your pay scales for all your positions documented, maybe you have in a binder or electronically or something, you can just go in there and print them out or copy them, hand them over, send them on their way, and go along, go out and do the rest of your whatever you need to do. That's probably the fastest way. Have those pay scales on hand or accessible, have them up to date, have them be consistent. That allows you to comply with this requirement. All right, now job postings. What is a job posting? I talked about job postings, what's required of them. Well, again, the DIR doesn't give us exactly what a job posting is or when something qualifies as a job posting. But something to keep in mind is if your job posting does not reference a specific position, then you don't you can't really include that information, right? Because say for instance, if you're hiring for a lot of manufacturing positions throughout your organization, you're hiring for laborers, you're hiring for machine operators, you're hiring for janitors, you're hiring for, leads or whatever it is, and you just want to put one posting out there, if you just put something general out there that says manufacturing job openings, competitive pay, or if you just put on the sign that says, we're now hiring, in those you can't really include a pay range because you're not specifying a specific position. Right? So I guess a good guidance would be if the posting is for a specific position or a specific area, you want to include the uh, the pay scale for that. If it's a very, very generic or general one, just now hiring. Hey, we're hiring, come join our team. You don't have to because there's no general generic pay scale for that. So pay scales just apply to specific positions or specific departments, and that's when we would have to post them. Another question we got when this initially came out was, can we just put in the starting, the hiring range or the starting pay? Starting at, minimum wage or starting at $20, starting at $25. Is that enough to comply? And the answer is no. If you're in one of these specific situations where you have a specific position that you're hiring for, you have to include the entire pay scale. In other words, you can say, hey, this position starts at whatever, but you also have to include the entire scale. So if I'm hiring a dishwasher for my restaurant, I could say, now hiring, dishwashers for Eli's, whatever, you know, hot dog emporium or whatever. And you're going to say, hey, dishwasher position pays from 20 to $30, starting wages from 20 to $22. That lets them know that the entire pay scale is from 20 to $30, but as a starting position, they can be expected to be paid 20 to $22. So we're including the whole pay scale for the position, but we're letting them know, hey, this is the starting range. You can include both, that is fine, but make sure you have the entire pay scale on there because, again, if we don't have that on there or we're not compliant, the state can basically have corrective measures for us, if you will, which basically means penalties, right? Fines, fees, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. But, um, you know, there is opportunities to show that you make a good faith effort to comply, or you make a good faith effort to follow these regulations. So again, that's where documentation is so important. Make sure you have your pay scales up to date. Make sure that you're showing that you are trying to show the pay scales for all positions or that you've updated them after the initial violation. If the state comes in and slaps a fine on you and you go back and you try to correct things and you show that to them, there is a chance that they can be a little more lenient or possibly, reduce the initial penalty. Now, as I promised, we are going to talk about 6 steps to create compliant pay scales. So if you don't have any pay scales for your organization right now, it's not something you've done. You've always just, historically just paid people this, or this is just the way it's always been done. Well, now's the time to create compliant pay scales for your positions. And it's 6 easy steps. I know it sounds like I'm selling something to you here, but I'm about to give you the 6 steps, the big secret to creating compliant pay scales, right? So we have this graphic that shows all 6 steps. So let's talk about each one of them one at a time. And the first one is, if your organization doesn't have pay scales, maybe you just recently started, you're the new HR generalist or the new HR manager, and you walk in and you say, "Where's the pay scales?" And the owner looks at you and says, "The what?" Or he says, "They're up here." It's like, "Uh-oh. Well, let's get to work. Let's get this done." So the first thing you're going to do is list all the positions or job titles in your organization because you have to create pay scales for all of them. Okay? So before we start creating pay scales, we're going to write down all our positions or type them down or whatever it is, put them on stickies up on the board and say, do they make sense? Do these positions make sense based on their job duties, responsibilities, experience levels, right? Or are we, just making up names as we go along? So make sure they all make sense. And then once, those job titles make sense, we're going to look at the employees under those positions, right? Do those positions reflect what the employee is doing? So for instance, if I have a manufacturing facility and I have a job title called Machine Operator 1, and I look to see what all my Machine Operator 1s are doing, and there's one that is not operating a machine. He's a forklift driver, and he never operates machinery. It's like, well, you know what? His job title doesn't reflect what he does on a day-to-day basis, so he either has to be moved to the correct job title or we have to change the job title altogether. All right, so take a look at that because why is that done or why does that happen? Well, sometimes, it's done for nefarious reasons if we don't want to pay people more. Sometimes it's done because, we're lazy and we don't want to create new job titles. Or sometimes it's done because, maybe we want to pay people more and that job title happens to pay people more, even if they're not doing those job duties. Doesn't matter. We want to make sure people are in the right slot and people are categorized correctly. Okay. So again, if once you break everybody down by job title, if you see that there's a big variation in maybe in what's paid or what the responsibilities are, maybe we have to break those job titles down a little bit more just so it makes more sense. So instead of just having, maybe HR manager or HR generalist, maybe you have to put levels next to it. HR manager 1, HR manager 2, HR manager 3. Doing this would help resolve that previous example we had with the people with a pay disparity or maybe one was an HR manager 1 and the other was an HR manager 3 based on their responsibilities, based on their, you know, whatever it is, right? And this also helps us to separate people based on things like whether they're full-time or part-time or exempt or non-exempt or whatever it is. Now keep in mind that, usually if you're a very small organization, you probably don't need, manager 1, manager 2, manager 3, or lead 1, lead 2, lead 3 because you don't have that many people. But as the organization gets larger, and the level of responsibility or the level of job duties changes, that's where having those differentiators really comes in handy, right? Really allows you to have job titles that reflect what is happening in reality in your organization. Okay, next one we have is ensuring the job descriptions are accurate. So again, it's not just about the pay scales. You should have job descriptions for all of the positions or all the jobs in your organization. And now these are not just handy for pay scales, but that's what we're talking about. So we'll start with that. We want to make sure that those job descriptions are accurate and they match up what the position is actually doing. And if for some reason the position changes, whether you take some duties away from it or processes change or procedures change or, whatever changes, make sure you update that job description as well. Now, those job descriptions come in handy because they help us to justify and, keep our pay scales up to date, but they also come in handy in other situations. So for instance, if you have job descriptions that list what the physical requirements of a job are, and you have an employee that gets injured or claims they can't physically do the job duties, you could send them to the doctor with that job description, and the doctor can know exactly what they can and cannot do, or if they can and cannot do their job. So, for instance, if you have somebody that is we'll keep picking on receptionists just because it's what came to mind, and they come into the office and they say, well, my doctor took me off of work, so I need a leave of absence. Like, well, why? Can you tell us specifically what you can and cannot do? Because they're your only reception, they're short. So you send them back to the doctor with a job description, or without job description, the doctor sends back a note and says, I'm taking them off of work because they cannot lift over 100 pounds. It's like, well, here's their job description. It doesn't require them to lift over 100 pounds. Doctor says, well, they have to, be able to sit down for at least 50% of their job. It's like, well, and the job description that says that the majority of their work is done sitting down. Doctor will come back and say, oh, well, never mind. Maybe we don't have to take them off of work. Maybe they can continue working. So again, having that job description that is accurate helps in many different aspects of your job. Okay. Next, once we have the job description, once we have all the different positions, we're going to take a look at payroll records because we want to make sure that the pay scale accurately reflects and encompasses what we're actually paying everybody. So if you say, for a forklift driver one, we're going to pay them from $30 to $40. The range is from $30 to $45, but you have a forklift driver one making $60. That's not going to work. You either have to move that $60 forklift driver to a forklift driver two, or you have to expand your pay scale to encompass them as well. Remember, the pay scale should include at least the lowest and the highest paid person in that position in your company. So that's how we start with reviewing the payroll records, right? Because we could determine, hey, our forklift driver should not be making more than $50 an hour, but you have one or two of them that are making $60 or $70 an hour. I mean, my first question would be, how do I apply to be a forklift driver with your organization? But the second one would be, why are they so far beyond the top of the pay scale? And why is the pay scale not expanded to include them? And again, that's just for their regular pay. We're not including bonuses, tips, or any other benefits, just their base wages. All right, once we have all that information, we make sure that we have their payroll information. That's when we create those pay scales. So we're going to start by listing what the lowest pay for that position would be. And that could either be based on what the lowest paid person in that position is, or even below that if you want newer people to start below that, and what the highest paid people in the organization in that position will be. So in other words, say you're figuring out the pay scale for your HR manager. And here's what your current HR managers make. You have Eric Hastings that makes $70,000 a year, Hannah Barrera that makes $75,000, and Elizabeth Rodriguez that makes $80,000. Then your pay scale should at least be from $70,000 to $80,000 because that encompasses all the existing pay for that position. You can expand it. You could say, pay scale is going to be from 70,000 to 100,000, and that gives you, room to expand upwards. But again, we don't want to create a pay scale that doesn't include everybody that's already working in that position. So for any non-exempt position, we want to make sure that the lowest end of the pay scale is at least minimum wage. And I'm sure you've all heard the news, minimum wage is going up again next year based on cost of living and inflation. I think it's going up to $16.90 if I'm not mistaken, but if you want to know for sure, tune in for our labor law update later this year. Currently it's at $16.50, and this also, of course, affects our exempt positions, our salaried positions, because the minimum exempt salary in the state of California has to be at least 2 times the state minimum wage, which is $68,640. So that the floor of our pay scale should be at least these numbers, nothing below that, please. So once, say if you're starting by taking the lowest paid person, the highest paid person in that position, then take a look at it. Do you want to expand it? Do you want to expand the floor to where we could start new people lower? Or do you want to expand the ceiling so we can keep, paying people more as we need to, right? Take a look at it. Take a look at things like experience, seniority, or educational degrees. If the person at the top of your scale is truly topped off, they're in the position where they cannot bring any more to the table, they cannot expand their education more, expand their knowledge base, or do any more duties, then maybe that truly is the ceiling for that position, and that's fine. You know, That's perfectly fine. But again, take a look at those factors because if you think that there's any room for that position to grow, then you want to make sure that you leave room for growth as far as compensation and pay, you know, in that pay scale. So again, that HR manager example, right? If you really need a manager with more experience than what you have right now, then maybe you'll pay them more than what you're currently paying the ones you have right now. So you can expand that pay scale a little bit. Now, what if everybody in that position is paid exactly the same? So for instance, if you have laborer one position where somebody comes in, they just labor, and you're going to pay them all minimum wage regardless. And if they want to make more, they have to transfer to another position. Can we do that? Can we just say there is no range? This is what we're going to pay for that position. We're going to pay anybody that comes in as a laborer one $20 an hour, no more. Or we're going to pay anybody that comes in as a cashier one, $20 and no more. That's it. There's no room for growth. If they want to grow, they have to expand their knowledge and become a cashier too or move to another position. Can we do that? Can we create a position with no range? Yes, that is fine. As long you can say there is no range for a position as long as it is at least minimum wage, right? That's perfectly fine. But keep in mind, of course, that doesn't leave you any room to grow there, right? The only way for somebody to be paid more would be to, again, transfer to another position, promote to another position or what have you. So again, remember, the pay scale or the pay range is what we reasonably expect to pay somebody and not exactly what we're paying. So, if you want to hire somebody and you want to leave room for paying somebody more because maybe they're exceeding expectations or you want to leave room for them to maybe make more in that position, keep that in mind. But again, if you want to say everybody that starts in this position is only going to make minimum wage, that's perfectly fine. You can do that as well. Okay. So once we establish our pay scales, we're going to take a look at them. Not just take a look at them to make sure that there's no typos or anything. We're going to take a look at them to see how they compare, you know, how they compare to our market. Are we going to stay competitive? Are we going to lose employees or lose candidates to others in our same industry, in our same region that pay more? Are we paying too much? Can we pay a little bit less? There's different free resources you can check out for that. I mean, salary.com, Indeed, Glassdoor. And now that there's that requirement out there that, large organizations have to include pay scales in their job postings, that gives us a great way to go and, peruse job postings to see if we are competitive with everybody else. If we're hiring, say, engineer one and we're paying them, 70,000 a year, and there's five of our competitors in our region that are starting them at $90,000 per year, guess where they're going to go? Probably not the $70,000 a year one unless you have some really, really good perks or something. So again, that's what we're reviewing for, to make sure we're staying competitive, to make sure we're competitive in our market, in the industry, and, in our region. Okay. Why? I mean, we want to make sure that the pay scale is equal, not really skewed in any way, right? So for instance, you say, well, they say they start at 80 and our top is 90. Well, yeah, but if you're skewed to the low end a little bit too much, people may say, well, I'm going to pass on them because I'm going to go to the one that starts a little bit higher, right? So you don't want to be an outlier. You kind of want to be close to what everybody else is paying in the region because you want to make sure that you also have your picks of the best candidates there and that you're also able to retain your talent, right? Retention is very important for this, okay? If you have any pay equity concerns or any kind of, anything that any kind of complaints or any kind of issues that come up, any kind of maybe somebody says that they're being discriminated against on their pay based on sex, race, ethnicity, or any other protected class, well, I always recommend, if you have those concerns, talk to legal counsel. Maybe you're, doing the pay scale audit for your organization and you see that, hey, you know what? For some reason, all the women in this position are being paid a lot less than the men. Maybe talk to legal counsel before you start making corrections just to see, what the best direction to do that is and how to best reduce any kind of risk for your organization. Now, something else to keep in mind too when you're going through these pay scales is, um, you know, do any of our employees need a raise? Are we paying them too little, right? Are we paying too little for this position? That could happen. If you've never done pay scales before and you're going through and figuring them out and you're like, whoa, we're really paying below market. This could explain why 10 people quit last year, and so and so is really doing a great job, but they're down at the bottom of their group. Maybe it's a time to make some of those adjustments, right? To make sure people are in the right slots, in the right positions. And also means, once you do the pay scales, do we have a process in place to make sure that we're equally and fairly, you know, doing pay increases, correcting pay disparities, right? I mean, are raises done systematically? Do we have like a review system? Do we have a scale? Do we have someone that signs off on all the raises? Or is it just, leads, managers, and foremen out there making it rain out in the office or on the production floor, or, deciding that they like so and so, so they're going to give them a raise or whatever. We want to make sure that we have a centralized, equal process to determine who gets raises, what raises are given, and when they are given as well. You want to have some level of control on that, either as an HR manager, HR professional, or as general management of your organization. So last step, step number 6, updating and auditing pay scales, right? Now, pay scales are not a one and done sort of thing for a couple of reasons. One, we just mentioned, minimum wage is increasing next year. So if your floor is the minimum wage, you're going to have to update that. The other thing is things change. Maybe your industry just has a growth spurt and takes off, and it's more competitive for talent. So you have to adjust what you're paying people, right? That's fine. Make sure you or somebody in your organization is in charge of auditing these pay scales from time to time, right? And take a look to see, are we paying everybody correctly? Are there any demotions? Are there any positions we're eliminating? Any positions we're combining? Any positions we're creating? Do we have any increases to the cost of living? Are we raising the floors or moving the ceiling on any of these pay scales? And if so, make sure that you update those on the pay scale and also on any open job postings you have that include those pay scales. So, some recommendations for auditing it. I mean, the person should audit them what we call on a frequent basis, and we'll let you determine what that is based because each industry changes at a different pace, right? So you can do it monthly, quarterly, yearly, whatever it is, or whatever makes sense for your organization. Okay. If you have a large organization with more position, more hires, you might want to do it more frequently as opposed to a smaller organization that's very consistent growth. Then you can do it maybe once a quarter, twice a year, once a year. Up a little bit more. Okay. So again, make sure that they're subject to the pay scale changes are subject to at least an annual change or based on business needs. All right. So some final reminders for you here. Thank you for hanging on here till the end. Um, those of another sex, race, or ethnicity are guaranteed equal pay for substantially similar work. We're paying people based on the work, not based on gender, color, religion, race, whatever it is. We're paying them based on the work. Okay? Do not ask for salary history information when you're hiring somebody, when you're interviewing somebody. Do not ask for their salary history. Make sure that we're retaining job title and wage history records. Make sure we're documenting any changes in job title, any changes in pay, and filing those away with the employee file, and be prepared to respond to pay scale requests from current employees and applicants. And of course, if you have 15 or more employees, make sure we're posting that pay scale in our job postings. If you have any questions as far as pay scales, please give us a call. Whether it's creating them, whether it's updating them, whether it's, how do I start them or whatever it is, give us a call. If you're a CA member, we do have a pay scale toolkit that will help you get started and keep them updated. If you just call on the hotline, give us a call. We could talk through what the process looks like, or you have any questions on how to make those changes. We would love to hear from you and love to help with that. Now, I thank you for your attention. I would like to remind you too, if you have any questions, whether it's about this topic or anything else, if you go home, kind of mull this over and decide, I really wasn't sure what he said. I should have asked at the time, but I was too shy. That's okay. Give us a call on the hotline. You don't have to look at me face to face to ask. You can talk to whoever is working the hotline that day, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, excluding some holidays, of course, because we like to party. So give us a call. Let us know how we can help you. If you're interested in more services beyond the hotline, we do offer membership to CEA, ranging from anywhere from a monthly associate membership all the way up to our ultimate membership. So there is a slide on there that details all the services. And Anna promised you the chance to let us know how we did today, what you thought about this presentation, or what you'd like to hear about in the future. Here is that slide. Take a picture of the QR code with your phone. It'll take you to that quick 5-question survey. Please let us know how we did. Did you like the presentation? Did you hate it? Is there something else you'd like to hear about? Let us know. Believe me, you can't insult us. We've heard it all. And finally, I saw someone asking about training codes. We do have codes for you for HRCI. We have 715406, and for SHRM 25-CKP7X. So if you are here for continuing education, there's your credits. Put them to good use. If you're not sure what to do with those credits, give us a call. We can help with that as well. And before I go, I will ask Anna, do we have any questions floating around out there?
I did not see any questions for in the HR realm. So those are all ones that I will follow up on. So as I promised, I will get that PDF of the slide deck because I know there's so much valuable information here that Eli just went over. I'll send that over to the entire attendee list. I know sometimes Zoom makes it difficult to download those PDFs, so apologies if you ran into some trouble, but I will be following up in the next few minutes. And then one more thing I wanted to point out, I did drop the link into the chat, for the next training coming up on October 14th at 10 a.m. That is wellness in the workplace. That is a really lovely training about just helping take care of your team, take care of yourself to avoid burnout, kind of the key indicators of what to watch out for and what to do to hopefully prevent it, but what to do to kind of steer things back in the right direction. So definitely check out that training, again, sponsored by our partners over at Ventura County. And with that, I want to thank our partners over at Ventura County for definitely all their generosity in not just sponsoring today and the entire series of trainings, but for sponsoring, bringing you that complimentary HR hotline. So make sure to call in, see if you can stump Eli. I like your fake business you came up with, Eli's Hot Dog Emporium. Don't think
There
I
you go.
wasn't listening. I heard it.
I know you do. I know you. My goal is to keep you
All
amused.
right, everyone. Thank you so much for your engagement, and we'll look forward to seeing you on October 14th for the next training. Cheers, everyone.